Welcome to Comic Books and You. Today we're going to be covering City Boy issue 5. I really didn't know what to expect when we started this particular series, but as it's been going on, it's an odd train ride. It doesn't have its ups and downs like some other books. It just is consistently special. It's not a typical superhero story. It's not a typical coming-of-age story either. It has a lot of different moving parts and very interesting interactions between our main character and someone that is already in the DC universe. And this particular book is no different. I was expecting something actually quite different, but we are going to see here that sometimes you don't need a huge action scene to actually move a story forward. In this issue, we do learn a few different things about City Boy. The main one being that his mother might not have been very kind to him from the start, even before she abandoned him. But we also see that he might have had some slight sociopathic tendencies from the get-go as well, which doesn't endear us to the character as much as we want. One thing we learn about his power is that we also need to take the term city very, very wide here, because apparently ant colonies count as cities as well. So basically any form of civilization would fall into his purview powers, which is not a bad thing. He really has good synergy and connection with our other main character throughout this story, mainly because the two of them are probably closer than we would want in terms of behavior and mental stability, as we are introduced to Swamp Thing in this book. He is not represented as the Avenger. Here he is the avatar of the Green, but he's not the Avenger of the Green or the destroyer of normal human behavior in this story. He is shown to have extreme empathy from Cameron, mostly because they have similarities with their powers. He might very well have simple human kindness, even though he is a completely inhumane character. His power is clearly much higher and much more powerful than Cameron ever was. I mean, he has the ability to connect to all the different parliaments out there, while Cameron probably only has access to connecting to maybe two of those subsets, let's say. But maybe hanging out with Swamp Thing or learning from Swamp Thing would stop City Boy from being just another city slicker.
Well, look at the city slicker pulling up in his fancy German car.
We start this story with a flashback from 20 years ago, back when Cameron was still a kid living with his mom, and his mom catches him killing a cockroach using a pin and gets rather mad about it. He kind of gets slapped a little bit, and I don't think it's the first time this happened there. This is a thing we will be talking about in a little bit, about the ramifications of what we see here, basically. But it does give us a bit of an insight on our main character. He wakes up in the present after having this probably bit of a nasty dream, and he's trying to relax and control his emotions while he's in a forest a couple miles outside of Bloodhaven. Unfortunately for Cameron, that's when he starts learning that he actually controls all cities, including ant colonies. But that probably would mean termite colonies as well, and beehives, and quite a few different things. So it's a bit of an unusual power overall, but could be very useful. Unfortunately, Cameron still has pretty big issues controlling his power. So the avatar of an ant colony just pops up, and it's it's simple. It's just a massive ant, and Cameron starts panicking a little bit once again. Luckily for him, the Swamp Thing is there to help him. Swamp Thing just goes and is casually chatting with Cameron as he gets stabbed through the chest with one of the giant ant leg, and it's Swamp Thing. It's not like it really matters to him. And Swamp Thing replies by just taking control of the avatar, binding it down with tons of vines and leaves and stuff to prevent it from moving and acting. Cameron does try to run away from Swamp Thing, which I would do as well, knowing the reputation of Swamp Thing. He is not always depicted as the nicest fellow, but Swamp Thing actually wants to help the young Asian man. He doesn't want to fight him, and he wants to help him in any way he can. Cameron explains that he is still looking for his mother, but that since she's a city person, Swamp Thing wouldn't be able to help him. But Swamp Thing does reply by saying that the green is everywhere, even in the darkest of cities, which is accurate, as nature always repossesses everything as soon as it can, and there's always traces of nature everywhere. The two of them connect together, and they connect to the green, and they go into a trance-like state, I would say, and it brings a vision of Cameron's mother and his new family, up until the point where we see that she actually died in this forest here. Probably around the same time as the Bloodhaven nuclear bombing happened. So a rather sad situation. Cameron has a bit of an emotional breakdown and realizes that even though he says that he has many questions for her and that he wanted to talk to her again, there was only one real question he wanted to ask his mother, and it was, did you ever love me? Which is very, very difficult to address here, as from everything we've seen from Cameron's mother, it does seem like she was quite awful to him throughout his youth. It's at this point that Cameron decides that he is done running away and starts walking back towards the city, as the cityscape starts taking over and starts getting everywhere. Not sure what exactly is going on there. And we end the book with our bad guy, Dr. McCarrison, laughing maniacally as he says that Cameron's a good boy with the extension of the cityscape. We will see how this is going to end. It's actually a very, very strong ending here to this book. And I do like that Dr. McCarrison, while he is a lackey of Darkseid, has been our main villain throughout this entire story. We do know his motivations, which are very, very simple. It works as a brand new character. The main cover for this book is actually one of the better ones I've seen in the common print category out there. Let's not talk about too much about variant covers or even the cardstock covers. As far as your main cover for the main book, this is a very good one overall in terms of thematics and aesthetics. We use the same artist for the cover as the interior, which is always a big plus in my opinion. This is one of those things that clearly attracts the eye. It's really easy to look at it and be interested in what is going on here with the split between our two main characters throughout this book. I would have preferred the color palette to be a little greener at the bottom with Swamp Thing. It's a little bit too dull with the blues and grays. It does give a decent contrast with the oranges and grays that we have around City Boy, but maybe a bit more intense greens here would have been better just as a thematic thing. Nothing here is really out of the ordinary or a failure, if you ask me. And this is a cover that will probably not be remembered, but would be remembered if those books were actually selling. For the book itself, it's a basic DC floppy, nothing out of the ordinary, nothing special. Hey, maybe they could have gone a bit fancy and gone with the Asian reading direction on all of those We Are Legend books. Honestly, I'm not sure why they created an imprint or a publishing initiative for those Asian heroes. We know that they're not going to get any continuation. None of the sales are any relevant numbers. And there's nothing special about those books outside of having an Asian hero. The back flap of the cover is Justice League Extra RWBY Superheroes and Huntsman Part 2 DC animated movie PG-13 whatever. I just don't care about that at all. I haven't heard any good reviews about that series either, so that's not a very good sign. We also get an ad for the return of Superman 30th anniversary. I saw a 2-page ad for this in another book. In this one, it's a 1-page ad with a few of the variant covers here. Pretty cool overall, but I really hate that the really cool covers are actually those awful 1 in 25 and 1 in 50 ones. It's not on my pull list. I'll probably get it off Capcan when it comes out. Not sure which cover I will get. I might just get the cheapest of the lot to review it. It's at least a bit interesting. On the complete opposite end, we've got Batman City of Madness by an Eisner-winning writer and artist, which means absolutely nothing nowadays. And as with anything Batman related right now, it's an hard pass. I'm not going to bother with this. And we get an ad for the upcoming smash hit movie Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom, with Aquaman not looking like Jason Momoa on there. I don't know why they cast Jason Momoa in that role other than trying to capitalize on his minute of fame he had at the time. We'll see how the movie goes. It'll probably be a catastrophic failure. Maybe this book will actually have better numbers in the end. And finally, we get the preview at the end, which is for the terrible Tim Sheridan, Alan Scott Green Lantern. I honestly do not like getting gay erotica in my all ages book. Even if it's a 13 up book, I have to say City Boy is not 13 up. I mean, it's a very basic, anybody can read it book. And what we see in that preview at the end, well, it's actually not even for 13 up. We're not going to discuss Tim Sheridan and his a catastrophically bad take here. You can see me talk about it in various streams around the interwebs. We might have a small discussion about this at some point. At this point in the series, obviously, we've gotten used to the art for the book, but I've seen decent improvement in terms of the art from issue 1 to this one. Issue 1 was fairly simple when you were looking at most of the characters, and in this one, we've got a lot more variety. We've got a lot more fun position. The proportions are still good. They're actually a little bit better than what we had in issue 1, where a few things were kind of off. And we got a lot more faces in this one, which is not something we had in the first few issues. So we saw a significant change here in the quality of the art, probably because the artist is getting used to doing the character, etc. But sometimes those little things mean a whole lot. There's that one panel where Cameron's in the green, where he looks far more Asian than in any other panels in the series. Really not sure what's up with that. We've got him here in this panel. And we had the one I used for his character intro. Those really look different in terms of facial structure of our character compared to what we had in the main book. Like I said, not sure what's up with that. Those panels might have been done first in a way. So let's think about it. Unless we actually have a clean discussion with the artist, we'll never get an answer. We get a decent number of insects in this issue. Butterflies, ants, a cockroach. They're actually all very well done, up to a very decent level. But unfortunately, none of them will ever be as cool as Michael the Bee, because superhero bees are still an extremely rare quantity in superhero history. 4 issues at us in the city all the time, and this one here, we're in the forest. And it's actually pretty good. Nothing super complex, nothing is super highly detailed, but the background work here is perfectly fine and reflects where we're supposed to be, and does show a decent amount of detail, which is not the thing that you always have when you have an artist going through and doing the old forest drawings. The Avatar is a pretty cool concept. We saw it in the previous page here, but it does show that Cameron is a threat wherever he goes, as long as he manages to learn to control his power in the future. I mean, as long as there's any form of civilization, you're boned. I mean, a meerkat colony, would that be enough for him to take control of it? Well, if ant colonies are, yes. You send them to an alien world as soon as there's any form of civilization or even like grouped animals, you're boned. This is a very interesting power set. Cameron's emotional outburst at the end is really well done, not only as a story element, but also as an artistic element. And I do really like how Swamp Thing looks at him. Swamp Thing is completely inhuman, but you can feel the compassion and the empathy he has in that short little panel in the middle there, which is very different than what a lot of times you end up having with Swamp Thing. I do think this is a very poignant page overall. I really do enjoy that the Swamp Thing here is not represented as this sociopathic destroyer of civilization and uncaring monster based on nature in this one. He's really shown as someone who lives with nature, in nature, and is willing to help people who are in nature as well. It's a bit of a different portrayal compared to what we have with him often enough, and it's an interesting change of pace here. Swamp Thing gives Cameron another strong male role model in this series. Yes, Swamp Thing is probably the closest thing you would have to, someone being non-binary, since he is not quite. He is sentient, but he's a sentient representation more than anything else. But I really think this is a good thing for Cameron overall, because it's pretty clear that he grew up without a dad. It is, however, really weird to use that in the story, because when I looked at the statistics, only 31% of Asian family are with single parents, and it's really the lowest of all calculated ethnic groups. You want to look at the numbers, they are really, really bad overall for all groups. And hopefully this is a thing that we can maybe curb in the future. Who knows how? It's a bigger threat than a lot of people want to believe in terms of how it affects young people in general. Young men very, very often require a strong male role model. There's the weird point that the ants make a bunch of noise in this book. Ants don't make noise, actually. Insects in general, I mean, except for the buzzing sound of their wings, they don't do a whole lot of noise. Swamp Thing does bring up many good points in this book about how running away from things is a bad trait to have, and it's very important to accept who you are, what you are, and what your place in the world is. This might not be the message DC wants to put out as much as they do in this book normally, but this is a very, very good message to have in there, and I think a lot of people should take it to heart. Cameron's real issue throughout the entire series here is really summarized in that single panel, in that single line, where he asks, what did his mom really love him? That's all that really matters to him here, and that's why he's not able to control himself as much, because he doesn't know if he was wanted to begin with. This is a theme that's recurring in many different books and many different stories throughout the ages, actually. So it's very good to have here and to explore here. And it's not a theme that you see very often with superheroes. I'm happy that we are actually having these kinds of discussions here. And now for the most difficult part of this video, where we're going to discuss a little bit of the issue of sociopathic tendencies in children and young adults. Well, is that something that I would normally talk about? Probably not. But here we're seeing something fairly clear in terms of this particular form of mental illness. Sociopaths are, I won't say common, but they're a common thing we see in movies, in comics, etc. But it's a thing that is still very, very misunderstood. Sociopathic kids exist. And it's a thing that seems to be from birth, not really something that you grow into, but something that you start out as. And that's a thing that's difficult for a lot of people to understand and for a lot of people to accept. You do see sociopathic tendencies in kids, a lot of lying, a lot of not being able to connect to other persons, an incline to violence, and an incline to destructive tendencies. Here we have Cameron killing insects, which is a very, very common trait in sociopathic kids, because that's the one thing they can easily have access to and easily damage. Of course, Cameron doesn't seem to have reached the points of, let's say, Jeffrey Dahmer, where he started going after more and more animals, bleaching their bones, etc. I mean, psychopaths come in all shapes and forms and in different levels. For Cameron here, what's his level? What's his issues? But we do have this going throughout the entire series. Are there medication or things that can help with people with sociopathic behavior? Well, there's no real cure, like I said, for it, but you can take medication for some of the comorbidities. ADHD medication can help a lot of people with sociopathic tendencies because a lot of them end up having attention deficit disorders, depression, anxiety. Those do have some form of treatment and will help people that are sociopathic. But outside of full-on therapy, and usually it's lifelong therapy, there's very little you can do. As I spoke with my retired doctor of a father here, he was the one really telling me here, it's very hard to control these kind of things. For some children, I mean, you can start on various therapies and things like that, but they're always going to have difficulties. And if you compound it with life's own difficulties, it's going to be a whole other game for these children. Can we blame Cameron's environment for everything that he did and everything that he does? Not really. If he has those types of mental issues, there's things that need to be addressed on there as well. One of the really awful thing about sociopathic behavior as well here is that it can lead to completely different outcomes depending on who you are, how you're raised, and what kind of resources you have, however. In DC, we do see an extremely successful and powerful sociopath in Lex Luthor. There's very few other characters that I can say is as defined by this as Lex is. But these kinds of sociopathic behavior can also leave you completely destitute, like Cameron that we have here. It says they're not able to connect to other humans. They're not able to behave properly in society. And they have those outbursts of emotions. You can understand why this is a difficult topic to breach. Pacing-wise, this is a book that's been going pretty well. And it's a single story split in between issues with not always a big cliffhanger at the end, but a decent one that would keep you interested in reading. You could also, when it's going to be compiled as a trade paperback, if it gets compiled as a trade paperback, it'll work fairly well as a single cohesive story. Another thing that works really well here is that the first 2 issues were the setup for our character, while the next 3 issues were issues that were regarding learning experiences for him and getting in contact with people that are there to teach him important lessons to let him grow into a better person. We really have 2 potential endings here with this book. Either Cameron goes bad, which is great because maybe we'll have Swamp Thing, Superman, and Nightwing fighting him and subduing him, which will cement his legacy as a villain and potentially something that'll come back over and over. Or, which is the more likely scenario, he will grow out of the situation and become a hero in his own right. Obviously, the reason I'm saying this is that they really can't have Cameron turn evil because that would kind of ruin the narrative that they want to have, even though they're messed with a lot of their narrative already, especially in this book. But it's an interesting thought experiment. Issue over issue, this is a book that's been generally good or better, and it's never really gotten any worse. Issue 4, I think, was weaker, but it wasn't bad. It just needed a few notes from the editor and a few things moved around. Not a thing that's on the same level as, let's say, Peacemaker Tries Hard, but it works really well for a new character and in its introduction in a larger universe that's already alive. Basically, that would be like slotting in a new character in a manga and making sure that he is part of the whole story. One thing, though, is that City Boy is not part of any other character. He's not in the Superman entourage. He's not part of the Bat family. He's not part of Swamp Thing's, I don't know what you'd call it. He's his own thing, doing his own actions, but he has good interaction and works well with all the other characters. This is a series that's actually been growing on me, and it's a thing that I would recommend you to just get something simple to read, simple to go through, and with no really terrible messages in it. It has its own issues. It has a few things that are a bit odd, but it works fairly well, and you can understand why they took those actions and those creative decisions. So I hope you guys have a very nice rest of your day. I thank you for listening to me for so long. Remember to click the bell, subscribe, all those good things. Keep on reading comics. Keep on enjoying them. I'll keep reviewing and analyzing them, and I'll see you guys later. Bye-bye.